The Twin History podcast brings together two Black Scotsmen, two twins, one historian and one storyteller to explore the moments that shaped our world. The show features Joe McCann, the eldest twin and resident storyteller, the one always asking why any of this shit actually matters, alongside Johnny McCann, 13 minutes younger, and the historian equipped with the dates, the facts, and the receipts. Every week, they invite listeners to pull up a chair as they unpack some of history's greatest tales. The ones you think you know, the ones you've never heard, and the ones that hit different when told by them. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Twin History Podcast. Our first episode, JFK, the Assassination. Actually, these will be our first two episodes. Turns out it's a double-parter for sure. You think it's going to be a double-parter? Yeah, I mean, we could do longer now. I've actually been listening to something on the West Memphis Free on another podcast, which is 43 parts. So if they can get 43 parts out of that, I'm sure we could get 43 parts out of the JFK case. But we're definitely not doing 43 parts, bro. Yeah, we're definitely not. So, for those who don't know, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JFK as he was known, was killed on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. That's in America, by the way. In America? What the hell? I think they would know it's in America. They might not. They might not know where Dallas is. You never know. There's probably another Dallas somewhere in the world. It's one of the most famous, cities on earth. Okay, continue on. It is. Maybe it's famous, but we need to set the scene here. But what state is it in? Texas. Good. I already said that. This isn't a history test. Or geography test, geography, yeah. First, I think it's only right that we chat about the Kennedy clan. Let's start with the family's patriarch, Joe Kennedy. Johnny, who was Joseph Kennedy? Joseph Kennedy was one of the richest men in America before his death. It said at one point in the 40s, he was worth over the equivalent of what would be $500 million today. So apparently, just before the Wall Street crash, and I don't know if he had insider information, he moved all his stock out of the market, so he wasn't hit at all by the crash. Is that true? Yeah, that's true. So how did he know? I don't know how he knew. I mean, he was maybe just, he was such a great investor or businessman. He had feeling what was going on the ground. And yeah, apparently that's true. Like he moved all his money out, all his stock out. We actually, my wife and I were in Ireland in 2023 and we went to Galway, where the Kennedy clan, that's where they come from, or close to Galway. And our driver on our tour to Galway told us that the Kennedy clan, they had a massive estate, or they were building a massive estate near Galway, and the locals were begging them not to build it because apparently there were ferries on the ground, like actual Tinkerbell ferries on the ground. You don't mean ships, like you mean ferries. Yeah, like ferries, like the mystical creature. Yeah, the mystical creature, and they begged them not to do it. And they said because they did, after that, the family were cursed. So that's what led to the Kennedy curse. Well, that is one of the things. I mean, if you believe in fairies, maybe you'd believe that story. But yeah, I think it's maybe just a combination of bad luck um, and such. Bad luck and maybe bad choices. Bad choices, yeah, absolutely bad choices. Joseph Kennedy, remember he was the ambassador to London, England, at the start of the Second World War. There's a London in England, I don't know. And he was known, he's reviled for his cowardness because when the Nazis, when the Luftwaffe were bombing London, he took his family to like a country estate just for their safety. but he was always reviled because even the Queen and the royal family remained in England at the time, or the king, it would have been at the time, remained in England even with the bombs falling on their heads. Didn't they have a nuclear bunker before the nuclear bomb existed? Who, the Kennedys? The Queen. Well, maybe she did. I don't know. She obviously wasn't queen at that time, but he was an appeasist as well. He wanted to appease Hitler, but his wife said that you can't blame him for that because no one knew that Hitler was, or her quote, criminally insane at the time when Neville Chamberlain went to Munich in 1938. But it isn't Hitler, who wouldn't want to appease Hitler these days? Are the Nazis have a bit of a renaissance? Yeah, sadly, since October 7th and the Israelis' actions and Gaza genocidal actions, I mentioned this in class actually, I saw an exponential rise in Holocaust denialism and like glorification of Hitler and the Nazis. So obviously both things are not mutually exclusive. You can condemn the Israeli genocide in Gaza without questioning whether the Holocaust happened and um, delegitimizing the Holocaust. And the only like quote unquote like legitimate historian who I've heard who's I mean didn't question the Holocaust, Eddie Hobsbawm, but he did he came to a figure of 4 million. He didn't say it wasn't six, but he just came to a clear figure, concise figure of 4 million. And when we're in the millions, who's counting? Anyway, back to the Kennedys. Well, talking about just veering off topic for a second, talking about Holocaust denialism has become something of a maybe not a mainstream idea, but you had characters such as David Irving, the disgraced historian, who would peddle that line, and he was ostracized for it, rightly so. Now you go onto Twitter and you see people openly saying the Holocaust didn't happen and the Nazis were left wing. But that's for another episode. Joe Kennedy, how did he make his money? He made it mainly through bootlegging. Or isn't a bootlegging thing a myth? No, he was definitely involved in Prohibition and he was definitely involved with the mob. And this obviously comes in later when John gets to the White House, because obviously the Chicago mob helped the Kennedys or helped John Kennedy get elected. So, as Nixon famously said, like they stole it fair and square. So, okay, that's fair enough. But so if he was involved with the mob in Chicago, did he have any dealings with Al Capone? I think so. I'm not certain about that. I mean, they might have crossed paths at some point, but he was very clever, wasn't he? He kind of there would in most cases there'd be a middleman. And where were the Kennedy? Where was he from in Ireland? You said Galway, near Galway, not exactly Galway, close to Galway. So was he born there, Joseph Kennedy? I think Joseph was born in the US. I'm not certain about that. He may have been born in the US. Okay. Well, speaking of the Kennedys in the US, am I making it up, or was there another Kennedy boy who was the apple of his father's eye who he planned to run for the presidency? Yeah, so that would have been Joe Kennedy Jr. So he was primed for high office from an early age by the Kennedy family, by Joe Sr., but he tragically died in combat. He was a pilot during the Second World War, so they were looking to run him in, in political office. And there are even rumors that Joe Kennedy Sr. was going to challenge FDR for the presidency, but whether those are true or not, I mean, it's never been substantiated, but apparently they had a meeting and Joe Kennedy Sr. told him that he was going to, told FDR, I'm going to run against you. And FDR said, are you sure about that? And brought out some tax returns that would have been quite damning to the Kennedy family. And so when JFK becomes president, it's not something that's random, is it? It's a plan that's decades in the making. Yeah, it's decades in the making. Like, I remember something we were reading about David Cameron, and like he was basically, his father was asked when he became prime minister whether he was surprised that his son was prime minister, and he just gave the interviewer a bemused look. He's like, not at all. So these people who come from rich families are handpicked from an early age to go into certain lines of work or certain businesses, certain like offices. So it is, yeah, it's not random at all. But wasn't JFK the first senator from Rome? From Rome. I mean, no, he was obviously wasn't from Rome, and there would have been other Catholic senators before him, but he was, yeah, he was like a young senator, and yeah, he was definitely Catholic. So, but he was the first Catholic president. Oh yeah, he was the first Catholic president. Yeah, we should discuss JFK's election, how he got into the White House. How did that happen? It's a well-worn path, but a well-worn story, I should say. But he won the 1960 election against incumbent vice president, who was Richard Milhous Nixon, by less than 100,000 votes. So Milhouse, the guy from The Simpsons, yeah, the guy from The Simpsons. So Nixon. The thing is, Kennedy has been seen, like there's a revisionist perception of Kennedy being like some standing in Times Square, like holding hands, like dove, and like foreign policy circles. That he wasn't. He was a comitical warrior, and even as early as 1956, when he was in the Senate, he said that Vietnam should not fall to the communists. And he said if if the DN government fell to communism, then the whole world was likely to follow that way and become part of the communist bloc. So, but let's go ahead. But wasn't that JFK want to pull the US out of Vietnam? Again, that, I mean, is one of those things. I mean, going back to Hitler, like people will say if Hitler had been killed during the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923, then the Second World War wouldn't have happened, and maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't have. It's just one of those unknowns of history, and boomers and Kennedy staffers and Kennedy acolytes like to present the president as being all knowing on these situations, and yeah, he may have, his policy may have been different from Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam, but I think he would have escalated tensions, and he definitely wouldn't have fully pulled troops out of the region. I think it would have turned into a full scale war as it did under Johnson, but maybe it would have been, shall we say, better managed or better handled under a Kennedy administration. But what was the Kennedy administration like? What was the presidency like before his untimely death in Dallas? Well, he was, I mean, I would equate him to like an Obama. He was the first black president. And he was the first black president. I thought that was Bill Clinton. You thought that was Bill Clinton, so did I. But he was a great orator, but like Obama, but I wouldn't say his policies were groundbreaking in any way. I for certain, and I've argued this in history papers, that I don't think he would have like pushed through the Civil Rights Bill as forcibly as Johnson did, or the Civil Rights Act, shall we say, as forcefully as Johnson did had he lived. You don't think he would have done that? No. Okay, so well, let's get back to Dallas. Why Dallas? Why was JFK in Dallas that day on November 22nd, 1963? Well, as maybe people know, maybe they don't, Dallas in the South, even now, is a huge part of the Electoral College in the US. And Kennedy, that's why he brought in Lyndon Johnson to be his running mate in 1960 to secure the South, because Kennedy and Johnson absolutely despised each other. And despite the like romantic versions that you might see in TV shows, there was the Kennedy TV show when Greg Kinnear played Kennedy. And there's, yeah, I remember that. There's a scene where Johnson like says like, "I've been hearing rumors like you're going to drop me for 64. Is that true?" And Kennedy, was that true? No, it was true. He was going to drop him. I don't think they had that conversation. Kennedy despised Johnson, and so did Robert Kennedy. He absolutely loved Johnson, and he said that Johnson was very, after the president's death, he was insensitive to what the family were going through. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I thought Johnson was a great president. Unfortunately, his legacy will always be Vietnam, but his domestic policy was transformational.
Okay, so more transformational than JFK's.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so.
Well, the thing is, if you uh, read conspiracy theories regarding JFK, one of them is that Johnson pulled the trigger himself. Is that
He was in the car, one of the cars behind him. Where one of the conspiracies is that Johnson was meant to be in the main car and with Kennedy and his wife and Lady Bird Johnson instead of Governor John Conley from Texas, but that's never been substantiated. Like,
well, he changed car at the last minute?
well, it's just one of the like conspiracy theories. He was meant to be in the car, but he like had a massive argument with the Secret Service saying he wasn't going in the car, for like obscure reasons. He didn't want to be in that car. Like he had like knowledge of the assassination ahead of time. But again, there's nothing to substantiate that. And in history, if you can't substantiate anything, you really shouldn't be putting it down on paper or speaking of it.
Well, that's fair. And in terms of Dallas, there was local tensions. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's why he went. They were worried about losing the South, so there were a lot of local tensions. I mean, there's the famous like Kennedy poster on arrival, Confederacy flag, Kennedy's face, wanted for treason. I mean, they thought that he was soft on communism, which was an absolute joke. I mean, he almost brought the world to nuclear annihilation the year before, like over the Cuban Missile Crisis. So he's definitely was not soft on communism.
But in terms of communism, what was going on at the time? Why was it such a big deal?
Well, I mean, it'd been going on for decades. I mean, after the end of the Second World War, Soviet Russia had, shall we say, occupied most of Eastern Europe, and the West, even things like the famous Marshall Plan by General George Marshall, there was a massive like financial aid package which was given to Europe after the Second World War. But one of the stipulations was that if you're taking Marshall aid, or if you feel you're entitled to Marshall aid, your country is not going to be under the communist bloc, and your country is not going to be electing socialist governments. So in 1948, there was a socialist insurgency in Italy, of all places, and they were going to vote in a socialist government, and Marshall, or an American like administration member, went to the Italians and said, if you vote in that government, socialist government, you're not getting Marshall aid.
So we're cutting you off essentially.
Well, you're not even being cut off. You're not even being like, you're not even going to be
considered.
like, yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, so it was a tense time regarding communism. And let's talk about Dallas. I mean, everyone will probably know the story, but for those who don't, Kennedy lands at the airport. So he lands on the Friday in Dallas. So he's there, and he's meant to be there for most of the weekend. So he gets to Love Field in Dallas. This is early in the morning. And in Dallas, they were saying like, I mean, compared to our like weather in November and December, they were saying it wasn't a very nice morning, but I think that would mean it was raining, but it was still like 100 degrees. So I'm sure it would have been pleasant enough even if you were out and about. So he gets to the airport, they get in the motorcade. Yep, and he was meant to be speaking at the trademark. So they were going through downtown Dallas to go to the trademark where he was to give a keynote speech. And the trademark will come up later because one of the suspects in the case, Clay Shaw, he was a founder of the trademark. So Tommy Lee Jones,
yeah,
from the film. So he goes down Elm Street And how many shots are there? Well, I mean, if you go by the 5 government investigations into it, there were only 3 shots. So, and they all, according to the government, came from the Texas Book Depository, which was a big, like, it's obviously still there, a big building, and they mainly, I mean, so when they say the book depository, people say, what was it like Waterstones or somewhere you could go and buy books? No, they just like, they basically shipped out books for, like, to local schools. Okay, so, and so he goes down Elm Street, there's 3 shots, he gets hit once or twice, or? Well, again, according to the government, he got hit twice, so once in the throat and once the fatal headshot. And back into the left? Yeah, back into the left, yeah. And so he's shot around 11:30? Is that correct? No, it's later. It's like closer to 12:30. So he's shot around 11, and then he is declared dead around 1. Yeah, we heart one. They rush him to Parkland Hospital. As Norman Mailer shows in his majestical book, Oswald, An American Mystery, he would, if he had lived, he would have been, like, clinically brain dead. There would have been no, like, comprehension of language or anything. So, but they were trying to, the Parkland doctors were just trying to keep the heart going. So he was better off dead, is what they're saying. Oh, well, if you're, I guess, I mean, people can live with similar conditions, but yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have been, he certainly wouldn't have been running for re-election, shall we say. But he could still run the country up until it's well, I mean, if you go from through some of the MAGA conspiracies, Joe Biden was, like, technically brain dead when he was, like, president. So yeah, I mean, that's what they believe. But okay, so he's dead at 1:00. It's around about 1:00. It's announced that what is the scene? How does America react to this death? Well, there's obviously, like, shock and then pandemonium. I mean, again, it would have been. It's just like, I mean, I'm trying to think of a situation you could equate it to. Like, maybe my wife and I went to see the royal casket when the Queen died, and I noticed there were, like, police on the roof, police shooters. So it would have been like if someone had walked from the crowd and, like, detonated a bomb and killed, like, Prince Andrew, and the cars following. There would have been, like, initial shock and then just chaos. Well, not to equate, like, someone like Prince Andrew to the Kennedy, although they both, like, obviously love young women. So, but in Andrew's case, like, scandalously young women. Kennedy's case, they were at least legal. Yeah, they were of legal age, of course. They were age, yeah. So Kennedy's dead at 1:00. Johnson is sworn in on Air Force One. Is that correct? Yeah. Apparently, Johnson insisted that he get sworn in before they leave Dallas. He's like, I'm not leaving Dallas until I'm president, because he didn't think it would be legitimized if they left Dallas with the body in the rear of the plane, and then it turned out, well, he hadn't been sworn in. Again, if you go back to Obama, when he first was elected, when he did the ceremony for the 2008 election, January 2009, I don't know if you remember, when he was taking the oath of office, he, like, I mean, as podcasters, we will know this, like, he fudged his words. So, like, they had to bring him back on a separate date to take the oath of office in private, in case maybe someone who was still loyal to the Confederacy, like, challenged Obama's presidency. So did Johnson fudge his words on the plane then? No, we don't know. We didn't. There's just a famous picture of, like, Jackie Kennedy, the wife's, the president's widow behind him, and Johnson taking the oath of office. Okay, but I feel it would have been important for Johnson to be sworn in. His country, for all he knew, he believed it was the Russians who had assassinated Kennedy. Is that right? Yeah, well, Johnson, as we said earlier, some people think he was part of conspiracy. Johnson always believed there was a conspiracy, so I don't know why he behaved the way he behaved when we get to the Warren Commission. But let's leave that for later. Yeah, that'll be discussed later. Let's talk about enemies of JFK then. The intelligence community, there's a belief that he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces. I believe that's what they say in the film JFK. Yeah, that's true. I mean, he just wanted, he didn't want to like get rid of the CIA. He just wanted them under a tighter leash. That's all. I mean, the CIA. Remember, before a few weeks before um, Kennedy was killed. I mean, the South Vietnamese president or prime minister was killed, and the CIA may or may have not been involved in that. So, I mean, that these things are only being approved by Kennedy. I mean, the whole Operation Mongoose, which Kennedy apparently inherited from the Eisenhower administration, this was basically just where they planned to disrupt Cuba because obviously Castro was seen as an enemy of the US and they wanted rid of him, but the CIA would not have been operating without presidential consent when it came to things like political assassination in other countries. So Kennedy would have to sign off on that, obviously. He would have to sign off on it, and it was said Robert Kennedy, like he was basically running it. So it wasn't like he's a bloodthirsty type of Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he was a bloodthirsty. He deserved to be shot in that kitchen by Sir. No, absolutely not. No, that was like one of the worst moments in American history. And after that happened, like Secret Service detail was assigned to all like presidential candidates. So that shouldn't have happened. Yeah, that definitely shouldn't have happened. Speaking of Castro, one of Kennedy's enemies was anti-Castro Cubans after the Bay of Pigs invasion went spectacularly wrong and JFK refused to send air support. So, yeah, the anti-Castro Cubans, I mean, you're getting ahead of yourself because you're getting into my theories about what I actually believe happened that day in Dallas. Well, we won't go into that now because that's for the next episode. Yeah. Okay. And there was obviously mafia friction, the belief that the mafia had helped uh, JFK get into office, and they were due some debt from Joe Kennedy. So there's obviously that, and then there's also what about Texas oil and Texas politics? Texas oil, I don't really know as much about. The mafia, yeah, there was always a rumor that the mafia like thought now we have like our boy essentially in the White House. But obviously after that, when Robert Kennedy became Attorney General, although I mean, as far as I'm aware, he'd never like really practiced law before, before becoming the top lawyer in the land. But Joseph Kennedy wanted him in, and he did a great job. But his main role as Attorney General, or he made it his main role, was to go after the mafia. Okay. And wasn't JFK's son, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but wasn't he a lawyer? He was a district attorney or assistant district attorney before he crashed that plane into the sea. I have no knowledge of that. Obviously, I know he crashed the plane. I don't know he was a lawyer. He was certainly an attractive young man. So those were the enemies. That's what was going on in Dallas that day. And after that, there was a young man arrested, Lee Harvey Oswald. Yep, Lee Harvey Oswald, one of the most fascinating figures in 20th century US history. So Oswald worked at the Texas Book Depository. After the shooting, he left the, well, we'll go into that later. We don't have to, Oswald is arrested. Yeah, he was arrested on the same day. It was just the assassination. Yeah, it was less than 90 minutes after. So Oswald leaves the building and he goes to his rooming house where he lived because he was separated from his wife and Rena at the time. He would only come back on weekends at that time. So he was estranged from his family. Most of it was his own making. But he went to his rooming house. He left. He was stopped by a policeman who he shot, J.D. Tippit. And you can believe what you want about the Kennedy case, and I have my postulations, shall we say, but
Oswald undoubtedly killed Tippett. I mean, I think there were 8 to 10 witnesses, and unless the government compelled them all to lie, they just happened to be walking down that street at the exact same time. At that exact same time, and there were a couple of sisters, I forget their name, and they said Oswald turned to them after he shot Tippett, and they thought he was going to shoot them too, but obviously he wasn't. He just looked at them because he obviously didn't realize they were there, and he left the scene. He went to the Texas Theater. He didn't pay for his ticket, and Johnny Brewer, who was a local shoe salesman, he asked the cashier of the cinema, or the theater as Americans call it, to call the police, and like so many officers turned up to arrest him. And the thing I've always wondered about, what did the cashier say to the police? Did she say, we got someone acting suspiciously? Or obviously at that time, she wouldn't have known that Tippett had been killed. So if she just said, oh, someone has went into the theater without paying, why would they have sent so many officers? Yeah. They sent about 100 officers to arrest the guy who paid for to go. Yeah, so, a lot of officers, and as Jim Marr says, and obviously we don't agree with everything that Jim Marr says. Was he a UFO nut? He was. He believed in pod people and stuff, but he did some good work on the Kennedy assassination. But he said at that time, the president's been shot, a local police officer, veteran of 10 years, has been shot, and the police are sending all those officers to arrest someone or apprehend someone who hasn't paid for a cinema ticket. Depends what film he was going to see, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what film he was in. Yeah, we'll check that out. Anyway, Oswald is arrested. So, and next time we'll speak about the suspects and the conspiracy. He was arrested watching an unknown film, most likely a pornographic film like Travis Bickle when he took Betsy. Taxi Driver. Then you did that on your first date with your wife. She's like, yeah, of course. We've been married. She beat up your diminutive ass when you came out. We've been married now for 10 years, so obviously it worked. I'd recommend to any guy on your first date, take your prospective partner to a pornographic film in 1970s Times Square. You know what? When my wife and I were on the US East Coast last year, New York was my least favorite place we visited, but I was so disappointed that Times Square had been cleaned up. And there weren't porn theaters everywhere. It's been cleaned up since the 90s, bro. I know, but I'd never been, so how was I meant to know that? But one of the guys, there was a great Irish bar that I frequented. One of the barmen said that it's like Disneyland now. He's like, it's not like the real New York. So, it's not the fucking Deuce, bro. The Deuce, man. Oh yeah, the Deuce, yeah. I never finished that, actually. Well, there's a great Zero Franco. Yeah. Jay Franco. Mine's. Yeah, Maggie Gyllenhaal. Yeah, twins like us. Yeah. They were both scumbags, so there's only one scumbag in this fun kid. So, let's get back to it. So, Lee Harvey Oswald, he goes in to see that porno. The police are like, why is this guy masturbating in the cinema? What the hell? The guy phones. The shoeman he phones the police. He's like, there's some guy with his pants down. No, it wasn't Johnny Brewer. It was the cashier of the Texas Theater who called the police. So he saw the behest of Johnny Brewer. So Johnny Brewer, that doesn't make much sense. Why would that guy say, this dude looks suspicious? He sneaks in to the cinema to a porno, which, if you're going to see a porno, you're most likely wanting to sneak in, right? You don't want the cashier to see your face. So you sneak in, you watch the film, and why would he even alert the cashier? Well, he said the reason why he did, again, this could be disputed. He said that the police, a police car went down the street where the theater was, and when it went down that street, the guy, Oswald, turned his face away from the street. So he ducked to see him. Yeah, he ducked into a doorway, essentially. If you believe that, how often do we see passing emergency vehicles and you don't just stand and look at them as they go by? But anyway, go ahead. Okay, we'll get into Brewer later. I'm sure there's something there. So, and Oswald is a yes, we're not going to get into Brewer. That's it. There's nothing else to say. There must be more to this, man. There's no more north. That's all I know. But if I saw some guy walking down the street, even if the president had just been shot, I wouldn't think, okay, that guy snuck into a cinema or he's ducked into a doorway. It wouldn't make a difference. He might have been like a overzealous, like George Zimmerman type, like citizen who was like a half-ass vigilante who thought he was doing society a favor by calling the police on someone. So he might do something like that. He wanted to do a citizen's arrest himself. I don't know about him. We might be mischaracterizing the man. I don't know why he said that Oswald looked disheveled, looked upset, looked like I think he said he looked white as a ghost and his hair was a mess. But well, I'm not buying Brewer's story. It seems a little fishy. I've told you, I mean, Brewer's story for me is incidental. The main story is what the cashier said to the police. Because if she just said, "Oh, guys, like someone has snuck into the theater, he didn't pay for his ticket," then yes, maybe it's suspicious, but we don't know. Anyway, but so Oswald is no. What did she say? We don't know what she said. I mean, have those transcripts never been released? No, I mean, at that time, I mean, one of the most infamous calls to the police was the Zodiac killer after he killed, who was it? Darlene Flugel and the other guy, I don't know the guy's name, the guy who survived, he got shot in the mouth, but he called the police and I've heard an interview with the police, radio dispatcher, and she said that he said like goodbye when he hung up and stuff, and it was quite creepy. But they don't have the recording because at that time they wouldn't record like incoming calls. Okay, we'll get to the Zodiac in this as well. I'm sure he's got a part in the conspiracy. So in terms of so Oswald, he's arrested at the theater. What was the name of the theater? Just the Texas Theater. Texas Theater. A very imaginative name. And when he's arrested, what happens? So he's arrested. He's took to Dallas Police Headquarters. He's interrogated for not the whole weekend. He is there for the whole weekend, but I think they say in total was like about 12 hours. Did he have a lawyer present? No, he was offered a lawyer. He wanted, and I forget the man's name. Forgive me. I think it might have been Abbott. I'm not sure, who had helped like communist and social groups in the past. And he asked for him 2 or 3 times. And to be fair to the Dallas police, I mean, they did try to get hold of him, but he was out of the office for the weekend hunting, I think, somewhere. And he was just like, it's not that he said, "Don't disturb me." He just couldn't be reached. Like, there's no way you could have, without physically driving up there, there was no way to get a hold of this lawyer. And okay, so Oswald is interrogated for 12 hours. What does he say in that interrogation? Well, that's the thing. There's no record of the interrogation. They just beat him for 12 hours. Well, that's we don't know what happened. I mean, the police say he never like confessed to the crime, but for all we knew, he could have said like, "I'm part of a conspiracy, like this and that, and like these are who my handlers are." We don't know what he said because they didn't record it. And did any of the men who interrogated him say anything? Yeah, I guess later. Captain Fritz, who did the main interrogations, he said like he liked Oswald and he would speak to him. He said the way, I mean, we've all watched 100 true crime like documentaries or TV shows, like you try to ingratiate yourself with the suspect, just ask him about his family, things he likes, and then you get him to like speak about things he's going to be charged with. Okay, but Fritz said anytime it got to that where like you owned the gun or like you fled the building and stuff like that, he just Oswald again apparently became like angry, and again we don't know for sure what happened. We don't know what he was asked because there was no tape recording. The Dallas Police Department didn't have a tape recorder for some reason. I mean, it's 1963, not like 1863, and there was no photographer to take notes. So
Was there no CIA on site? Was there no FBI?
There was FBI. James as a wholesale who was who Oswald had dealt with before when Oswald got back from the USSR. We'll get into that. Halsey went to Oswald's home in Dallas. Oswald wasn't there at the time. Obviously, he was estranged, and he was just doing like the FBI say general checks on people who have had like leftist affiliations, because obviously at that time the Red Scare is over because the 50s are over, but there's still like an inherent, for me, irrational fear of communism at that time. So Halsey turned up, and I get when he was at the interrogation, Halsey, he turned up at some point, and as soon as he walked in the room, Oswald was shouting at him and saying like, "You're the one who's been hassling my wife at home and stuff." And apparently the Dallas PD were like awestruck, like, "Oh, maybe this guy is an agent, because how would you know, like a random FBI?" So they believe that Oswald could have been a CIA agent or a CIA asset or operative. Well, they don't necessarily believe that. They were just a bit bewildered that he knew this FBI agent. Yeah, I mean, that is quite interesting. But, and so Oswald gets interrogated. He has a mini media conference, right? He's walking along the corridors, and he says he's not been charged. They've not told him why he's been held. Is there any truth in that? Yeah, he wasn't. I don't think he was charged with the president's murder for like maybe 12 hours after it happened. He was charged firstly with Tippett's murder. I think basically as the sun came up on Saturday morning, he was charged with that murder, and then he was charged with the president's murder. Okay. Well, I think, we're up to that point where Oswald is charged. People believe they have the assassin, they have him in custody. So, Oswald, who was he? Like, let's talk a little bit about Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, sadly, I mean, just to go on that about what you were saying previously, yeah, they assumed they already had the assassin, and like any more investigation was not necessary, which is basically a dereliction of law enforcement and police duty, because you may believe that this guy has done it, but you need to follow up other avenues and other leads. And something that's always struck with me was, we'll maybe get into this, we might not, during the president's autopsy at Bethesda Hospital, Naval Hospital, wasn't it Parkland? No, the president, I mean, again, he was moved, which at that time was illegal, because if under state law, the autopsy should have been in Texas. But I mean, I think we'll let them off because it was the president. It wasn't just like a normal citizen had been killed. Jackie Kennedy would not leave Texas without her husband's body. But during the like autopsy at Bethesda in Maryland, at one point, I think it was the Surgeon General of the Navy came up during autopsy and said to the chief pathologist, like, the police already have the man who did this. Is there any need to do a full autopsy? And it's like, the guy's just been arrested. This is like 3 or 4 hours after the murder. It's like, how would that Navy surgeon have known that Oswald was the killer and Oswald alone was the killer? So just things like that. And yeah, the Dallas police, I mean, it's been rumored for years that LBJ called them and said, like, "Captain Price, you've got your man. The investigation's over." Whether he did or not, again, we don't know. But basically, pressure was being, not that it would have mattered, but pressure was being put on the Dallas police to wrap up an investigation as soon as possible. Well, I would say they're probably pretty much out of their depth. They're dealing with the assassination of the U.S. president. It's not you're not interrogating a supposed an alleged assassin every day. So perhaps they just bungled the case. Yeah, they bungled the case. I mean, I'm surprised there are some Kennedy historians who think they did a good job. It's like, guys, you lost your fucking suspect. Like, you did not do a good job. But we'll get into that. Yeah, so Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, he was 23 when he was 24 when he killed Kennedy. He looked older. Thanks for correcting me on that. No, it's fine. He looked older. I mean, you're right. He looked older. He had like a massive tartan. He was losing his hair. So he'd been a U.S. Marine. He'd been born and lived in New Orleans. He went to join the Marines. I think he was 16 when he joined the Marines. So he became a radar operator. So basically, that is just like Johnny Cash. What? Like Johnny Cash? Like Johnny Cash was a radar operator? Yeah, he was. No, he wasn't. He was. Well, if he was, how the hell am I meant to know? You're a historian, you should know. Johnny Cash was a radar operator, so. Well, I mean, they definitely didn't show that in the, like, Joaquin Phoenix Walk the Line film, but maybe he was a radar operator, I don't know. But Lee Harvey Oswald certainly was, and it was a skilled job, and he was one of the top, like, percentile in his class for radar operators, so he was based in Japan and mainly in the east, like the Far East, the Philippines and such, during his Marine career, shall we say, in the Marines, and then he had a like honorable discharge because his mother was apparently sick, but she wasn't. No, she wasn't. He just wanted out of the Marines. He absolutely hated it. So he came back to the US for a while, and then where did he settle, in Dallas? Or no, he didn't settle anywhere. He just came back to put his affairs in order, and then he took a boat and he went through Finland and he entered the USSR. He took a boat? Yeah, he took a boat to England, and then they went to Finland, and I think by train he went. I could be wrong on that. He definitely went through Finland, and he like went to Russia. So he went to defect to Russia. Yeah, he went to defect to the Soviet Union, or I mean, some people have said that no, he wasn't like a genuine defector. He was there on a mission, like an intelligence mission. But again, we'll maybe get into that during the conspiracy part. But that the Russians reject him, and he tried to kill himself. Yeah, I mean, again, the suicide attempt was superficial. He got to Moscow. He had what they called an tourist guide, so it was basically just your personal tour guide. As the Soviet Union, they don't want like Westerners just wandering about by themselves in the 60s in case they are spies. So he had an tourist guide. She took him round, and at one point, he asked for citizenship, and she said she'd look into it, and he went to the US Embassy in Moscow. Richard Snyder was the chief consul. Apparently, Oswald came in, did a performative act, slammed his passport down on the table, and said he wanted to renounce his citizenship and he wanted to become a Soviet citizen. It's not that simple. Even now, we know with citizenship is not just going to happen like that. So he disappeared into the ether, and when they told him they were rejecting his bid for citizenship, he attempted suicide, but it was a super bathtub. In a bathtub, he tried to slit his wrists. He spelled it Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison? What do you mean he had a drug overdose? But he was in a bathtub, wasn't he? He was in a bathtub, but he didn't slit his wrists. So I know he did, but he was in a bathtub. So yeah, they were both in a bathtub. One of them wrote Riders on the Storm. One of them didn't. One of them shot the president. Maybe. What was Jim Morrison doing on that day in Dallas in '63? Anyway, Jim Morrison, he wasn't in Dallas. I know he wasn't in Dallas, but you brought him up. Yeah, that's fine. But so he tries to kill himself. The Soviets are like, we feel very sorry for you. You can move to Minsk. Yeah, Minsk, which was a provincial city in the USSR. When Snyder heard about that, he's like, that serves him right. And when he got asked at the Warren Commission what he meant by that, he said Minsk was like a backwater town, and it would suit someone of Oswald's temperance, shall we say. So Oswald exiles himself to a remote part of the Soviet Union where no man wants to go, where the sun never rises. Yeah. And how does he get on in Minsk? He gets on okay. I mean, I think he was hoping, obviously, the Soviet Union at that time was very dismal. So if you're going there, you'd want to end up in St. Petersburg or Moscow. But he ended up in Minsk. He worked at the local like radio factory. Like they would build radios, they build TVs. Apparently he was very lazy and some of the other workers didn't like him, but there was a mistake around him because it's not every day you've got like a US citizen or US national in like Minsk. So he was like a minor celebrity, like local celebrity in inverted commas. So he's how long was he in Minsk for? It was almost by the time they got back to the US, it'd been almost like 3 years. So he meets his partner in Minsk. Yeah, his wife Marina, who's a beautiful young woman. She even now? No, not now. I mean, there was a horrible like Daily Mail article about Marina maybe 4 or 5 years ago. What she's doing now, and there was because she likes to keep to herself, which is fair enough. She didn't always, but I mean, I think she just got sick of like everything that was going on. So she's still in Dallas, but there was a picture of her. She's a much older woman now. I mean, this was the 60s. So you're always 40, 50, almost 60 years later. But was it Marina's dad or uncle involved in the US Army or no, intelligence, Russian intelligence? But sorry, Russian intelligence. Yeah, but he wasn't like he wasn't like high up or anything. He wasn't like a colonel or anything. He was just like a low level. Like my mother-in-law works for the Scottish government. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, I understand. So he meets Marina, they fall in love, and why does why does Oswald decide to go back to the US? He just, for him, Soviet Russia was not the Marxist utopia that he was hoping it would be. So well, how many missions did he run for the KGB whilst he was there? None, as far as I'm aware. I mean, again, I don't know. Obviously, the KGB. I mean, the files weren't released on Oswald until the like early to mid 90s. That's where Norman Mailer got most of the material for his book on Oswald. But the KGB said they obviously looked at him, but they didn't think he was of much worth to them. And whether that he's a radio operator in the Marines, though, surely he must have been of some worth to the KGB. Well, as soon as he like defected to the Soviet Union, and as soon as the Marine Corps heard about that, they changed all their settings anyway. So any information he may or may not have given the Soviets on his planes was useless. Okay, so he returns to the US. Where does he end up landing? Well, I mean, I don't think it's important where he landed, is it? He landed in New York, but wasn't he expecting a whole host of journalists to be there waiting for him? When he defected, there were a lot of negative like stories in the media about him, like because it was a big deal. U.S. Marine defects to Soviet Russia, so he did think when he came back that there would maybe be that same level of press attention. But yeah, when he got to New York, there was no one there, and apart from his mother. No, that's not true. What do you mean? I don't think she was there. I think that's just TV shows that were showing that. Yeah, but didn't he ask her when he landed, "Where's the media? Where's Walter Cronkite?" That's when he got to Dallas. No, that's not when he landed in New York. Yeah, but we're arguing over particulars. He landed somewhere. His mum was there, and he was like, "Where's the press?" No, it was Robert Oswald, the older brother, who said that Lee seemed disappointed there was no media. So there's no media there. There's no fanfare. There's no CIA waiting to arrest him and throw him back into Russian gulag. So CIA should have been there to debrief him, to speak to him, but not everything. So he could let them know how his mission had gone. Yes, so he could let them know how the mission had gone. So he lands. Where does him and Marina set up? Well, they set up initially with Oswald's mother, but she was such an overbearing woman, and I mean, she absolutely adored Lee, but he despised her, like absolutely reviled her, and they left as soon as they could, which I think was like a week later. So where did they go? They were still in Dallas. So as soon as he moved back to the US, he moved to Dallas. Yeah, as far as I'm aware. Was this when 61 or it would have been 62? So just a year before the Kennedy assassination. Well, about 16 to 18 months before. So he's in Dallas. What is he doing? What does he do for work? What does his daily life look like? Well, when he first got to Dallas, I mean, people like Posner, who is or Gerald Posner, who's like a proponent, I should say, of the lone gunman theory. Yeah, he wrote a great book called Case Closed. Well, you call it great. I mean, it is good for wiping your letters wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. He just obviously, and we're told never to do this in history, he had a predetermined like theory on Oswald. So, and he sets out in the book to paint or portray Oswald in the worst possible light. And one of the things he honed in on was like Oswald was not intelligent and was not proficient in the Russian language. But you asked, what did Oswald do when he first got to Dallas? One of the first things he did was he'd kept a diary in Russia, and most of it was written in Russian. Okay, so he wanted to transfer that into a book, so no one published it. No one published it because basically he didn't have the money to pay to get it typed up. And also at this time he meets Russian language speaking expert Peter Gregory, and he asked him, "Do you think I could become like a Russian language teacher around Dallas?" And Peter Gregory gave Oswald the test, and he said, "Absolutely." But who the hell would want to learn Russian in Dallas in the 60s? Well, I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. Like, no, he would have had no pupils. No wonder he went and shot the president. Well, maybe he wouldn't have, but it just shows you, like, you lived in Hungary for like 14 years and you could barely speak the language. Well, that's not true. I'm born in Hungary, so. Why do you say Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president in Hungarian? Well, I'm not going to say that. GB may be listening. But I just mean, like, Hungarian, Japanese, and Russian are meant to be the three hardest language for English speakers to learn. So the fact that Oswald came back and he was proficient and fluent in the Russian language maybe goes against Posner's theory that this guy was like a complete moron. But I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with that, because I knew fucking idiots in Hungary who spoke Hungarian who were foreigners. They could still be morons. They're good at languages. Yeah, good point. I mean, that's a fair point. But we'll get more into Posner when we get into the conspiracy aspect. It was episode 2. I wrote a paper on the Kennedy assassination just last summer, and I absolutely like railed Posner in it and his analysis of Oswald and his analysis of the case. Well, you're an inspiration to us all. Oswald is in Dallas. When does he start working at the book depository? I mean, he gets back to Dallas in 62. So maybe like March, April 62. So he doesn't start working in the depository until about maybe like late August there. What does he do? What is he doing with himself? He's not doing much. He's doing like menial jobs around Dallas. They eventually go to New Orleans. He live in New Orleans. Yeah, for a little while. But he essentially is doing menial jobs. He works in a place that grinds coffee beans, things like that. Okay, so him and Marina, they have a child at this time, or they already have a child when they land in the US? They have a child at that time. I'm not sure which one it was, like June or the other child who they have later when they're in Dallas. I'm not sure. But their marriage is essentially falling apart. Essentially, she said that in Russia he was very sweet, like quiet, secretive in a sense, but sweet. But no, you have to be secretive if you're a secret agent, no? Yeah, of course, if you're a CIA or an intelligence operative. But she said that when they got to Dallas or when they got back to the US, his personality changed. He became more abusive, physically and verbally abusive.
So Oswald shoots the president, allegedly, is apprehended, yep, and then interrogated, and then rightfully convicted and sent to Alcatraz, where he spends the rest of his life in solitary confinement and making love to Al Capone. Making love to Al Capone, who by this point must have been dead, but I'm not sure. And obviously, he wouldn't have went to Alcatraz if he'd been convicted in Dallas. But obviously, Oswald was never convicted. On the Sunday morning of the weekend after when the president was shot, Oswald was being transferred from the Dallas police station. I think they were transferring him to the county police station where there was better security. They wouldn't have had to let the media in. It would have just been a bit more airtight because there had been death threats issued against Oswald. Like people phoning the Dallas PD saying we're going to kill him and this and that. So the plan originally, and to this day, there's never been a satisfactory answer as to why they didn't do this. They were going to transfer him at like 2 a.m. Everyone's asleep. Most of the media aren't there. But Captain Fitz waited until the Sunday morning. And some people think he waited so that media and the photographers would have a chance to get photographs of Oswald as he's being transferred, get some sound bites from him. Obviously, they didn't think he was going to be what would happen next, but it was obviously a fatal mistake. So what happened next? So Oswald is being transferred on Sunday morning. It's just after 11, I think, on the Sunday morning, and they slept in the morning too, Captain Fritz and his team. No, they didn't sleep in. I think they interrogated him more on Sunday morning because Captain Fritz wanted to be the one who got the confession, so he wanted to be the one to break him. So Oswald didn't break, and they were taking him to a van or a car to transfer him, and as he was being transferred, a figure emerged from the crowd with a hat on and shot Oswald in the lower stomach area. And the medical officer or the doctor at Parkland Hospital where Oswald got took to, although they made sure not to operate on him in the same surgery room, they operated on the breast area. Yeah, he said, "You've never seen a bullet do more damage than that bullet did." So obviously the CIA had sent their top assassin to silence Oswald. Well, someone silenced Oswald, and that was Jack Ruby, who was a local nightclub owner. We'll do more on Ruby later. Let's talk more about Oswald's marriage to Marina. It was very dysfunctional and destructive and just unhealthy, I would say. Apparently, I think I alluded to this before. When he was in Russia, he was quite nice. He was sweet to her, but as soon as they got back to the US, he became a tyrant, essentially. He didn't want her conversing with their children in anything other than Russian. He didn't want her to learn English. He would beat her severely at times if he became so enraged, and she was basically an abused wife. And he was like the worst kind of husband you could think of during their time in America. No, so they moved to New Orleans. Why was that? Well, Marina was happy about Oswald going to New Orleans for a specific reason, which we can get into later, or we can do it now. Well, was this a part 2 reason or a part 1 reason? Well, it was because of the alleged attempted assassination of General Edwin Walker. Let's do that in part 2, because that's an important part of the conspiracy, or the non-conspiracy. Okay. All right, so they moved to New Orleans, and then for whatever reason, they moved back to Dallas. Yeah, they moved back to Dallas. I think maybe at that time, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe more job opportunities in Dallas. So Marina and Lee are back in Dallas. Obviously, at one point, Marina moves out. She takes the children. Lee is distraught. He only sees his kids once a week or twice a week. I don't know. I mean, he did love his children. I don't know how distraught he was about that. I think he enjoyed having so much free time, but he was not to say he didn't love his wife, but he was a man about town then.
No, he wasn't a man about town. I mean, there's been rumours for years. Norman Mailer argues that Oswald was gay, but I mean, again, it's not relevant to the case, is it? It wouldn't be relevant to the case at all. Although the Warren Commission, which we'll get into, they did want to show him as being gay or impotent or both. Well, okay. So Oswald, he's back in Dallas. He gets his job at the Texas Book Depository. When did he get that job? Do we know? So this would have been late August, early September. Oh yeah, you've already said that. So it wasn't long before the assassination. So he gets a job, and assuming he hated the job. I mean, I don't know about that. I know he hated a lot of his other jobs, like the coffee job I mentioned. He worked in a metal factory making sheets, basically. Metal sheets. I don't know exactly what it was for. A job he did love. I think he worked for Jaggers Stolville, I think they were called, and it was a skilled job and had things to do with like military operations and stuff. And I think he really enjoyed that job. Okay, so he obviously doesn't enjoy his job at the book depository. With the right there, it's manual labor, it's repetitive. But in any case, he's presented with this opportunity to write himself into the annals of history. Yeah, if you believe that he killed the president, yeah, it was the perfect opportunity. It's presented with the opportunity. There's a president who's going to be passing his window, a president he presumably hates. No, he didn't hate Kennedy. Apparently, he admired Kennedy. He hated the idea of capitalism. And again, Norman Mailer says, it wasn't, if you believe that Oswald killed Kennedy, it wasn't anything personal. It was a political act where he's killing the embodiment of capitalism in the US president. Okay, so on the November 22nd, President Kennedy is shot at 12:30 p.m. Dallas time. And in our next episode, we will discuss who shot Kennedy, why they shot Kennedy, and the various conspiracy theories around this case. So the Kennedy assassination, I guess our generation's equivalent event, shall we say, would be 9/11. So everyone remembers who were alive at the time where they were when Kennedy was shot. So everyone who was alive during 9/11 remember where they were. And I remember I was at the events at the time. I think it was just for a routine checkup. Hello, is this the cops? And then there's some victim in here. I was attacked by a coked up whore and a crazy fucking dentist. It's not 12 Monkeys, bro. Anyway, I was at college on 9/11. But anyway, that's the end of our first episode of the Twin History podcast. We're discussing JFK, and we'll be discussing JFK next week too. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye.
The Twin History podcast is a Lost Cosmonauts production, produced by me, Virag Esther Toot. Additional producers are Dale McGoldrick, Johnny McCann, and Joe McCann. Written by Johnny McCann and Joe McCann. Original music and score by Kevin MacLeod. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok under the handle The Twin History Pod. You can email us at thetwinhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.